So we can start now.
A very warm welcome to all the dignitaries present here. With the permission of our worthy Vice Chancellor, I request him to grant us the permission to begin the proceedings of the day.
Yeah, you have my permission to start.
Thank you, sir. First and foremost, I would request all of us to rise for the University Dhani. Welcome to all the dignitaries present here. With the permission of our worthy Vice Chancellor, I request him to grant us the permission to begin the proceedings of the day.
Yeah, you have my.
Thank you all. Sir Arvindji, Vice Chancellor Punjabi University, Patiala. Dr. Heminder Bharti, Director, Center for Restoration of Ecosystems of Punjab. Eminent speakers of the day, representatives from the Punjab State Council of Science and Technology, seniors and colleagues, friends and audience connected with us on Zoom, as well as watching the live feed on YouTube. A very warm welcome to all. I take immense pride in being given the opportunity to introduce the theme of this talk with you. Friends, today we are commemorating the World Wetlands Day, organized by the Center for Restoration of Ecosystems of Punjab in collaboration with the Punjab State Council for Science and Technology. Wetlands are areas of rich biodiversity. In terms of supporting life, wetland is a habitat for numerous plant and animal species, a few of them globally threatened and critically endangered. Wetlands are vital for ecosystem survival and survival of humans as well as other species. They support biodiversity and are among the world's most productive environments, providing water and primary productivity upon which countless of species of plants and animals depend for survival. They provide wide range of important ecosystem services and resources such as food, water, fiber, groundwater recharge, water purification, flood moderation, erosion control, and climate regulation, besides acting as a major source of water supply, helping soaking rainfall and recharging groundwater aquifers. They also have recreational, historical, scientific, and cultural importance. Wetlands across the world are protected by the Ramsar Convention of 1971, signed in the Iranian city of Ramsar. The Intergovernmental Treaty came into force in 1975, which aims for the conservation and wise use of all wetlands through local and national actions and international cooperation as a contribution towards achieving sustainable development throughout the world. As of today, February 2nd, 2022, there are total 2,465 Ramsar sites in the world. India has a total of 49 Ramsar sites, and to commemorate the World Wetlands Day, today itself, the Khadajia Wildlife Sanctuary in Rann of Kutch, Gujarat, and Bakadia Wildlife Sanctuary in Uttar Pradesh have been added to the Ramsar list of wetlands of international importance. India has taken many leaps and strides in the conservation initiatives and interventions for the protection of wetlands. The Environmental Protection Act of 1986 was a hallmark legislation that called for the protection of environment and other aspects, including wetlands. The National Environmental Policy of 2006 emphasized the need to set up a regulatory mechanism for all wetlands so as to maintain their ecological character and support their integrated management. The National Plan for Conservation of Aquatic Ecosystems is a single conservation program both for wetlands and lakes being implemented by the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. The Wetland Conservation Management Rules were enacted in 2017. They were notified by the ministry and they serve as a regulatory framework for the conservation and management of wetlands in India. And this very day last year, a Center for Wetland Conservation and Management was established as a part of the National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management in Chennai. So wetlands are of prime importance to us in the sustainability and survival of ecosystem. With this brief introduction, I would request my worthy colleague, Professor Heminder Bharti, Director of Center for Restoration of Ecosystem of Punjab, to deliver the welcome address. Dr. Bharti.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gautam. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Arvind, Dr. Harni Nagendra, Ms. Gitanjali Kanwar, university officials, my colleagues, friends. So, well, Dr. Gautam has already emphasized on the role and significance of wetlands. And of course, more on this issue will be addressed by our speakers. So as far as conservation biology, as far as conservation biology, there's somebody whose mic is not. So as far as conservation biology is concerned, the science has progressed a lot in the last decade or so. So as we are passing through a phase when human activity has a significant impact on ecosystems and climate, the impact has been such that the current epoch has been dubbed as Anthropocene. And of course, poets are no exception to this. There is a couplet from a famous Urdu poet which says that "Chehre pe sare sheher ke garde malal hai, jo dil ka haal hai, wahi Dilli ka haal hai." So great naturalist Edward Wilson left us with the legacy of Half Earth Project. We deliberate on 30 into 30 initiative. We talk about 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in temperature. We glamorize afforestation, reforestation, and so many other activities. So given this backdrop, the best way to conserve nature is to understand our approach, our thought process, and the scientific basis or logic, which most of the stakeholders lack. We need participative approach, adaptive management, holistic thinking, and of course, long-term planning. So this is the very purpose of this center established by Punjabi University. And what we are initiating today is one step in this direction with the hope that we contribute towards the betterment and sustenance of future generations. On this note, may I request Dr. Gautam Sood to proceed with day's program. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bharti. Without wasting much time between you and the speaker for today, I would like to introduce the first speaker of today's webinar, Dr. Harini Nagendra. Dr. Nagendra is a Director of Research Center as well as the Center for Climate Change and Sustainability at the Azim Premji University, Bengaluru. Over the past 25 years, she has been at the leading edge of research examining conservation in forests and cities of South Asia from the perspective of both landscape ecology and social justice. Her areas of interest and expertise include ecology and development, urban ecology and sustainability, land change science, remote sensing for ecology and conservation, forest conservation, collective action, and commons research, besides sustainability education for Global South. She has been a recipient of many coveted awards, including the 2009 Cozzarelli Prize from the US National Academy of Sciences, the 2013 Eleanor Ostrom Senior Scholar Award, the Clarivate Web of Science Award. She has authored several well-acclaimed books on nature and forestry and has to her credit over 150 research publications, including recent papers in Nature, Nature Sustainability, and Science. She also authors a monthly column, The Green Goblin, in the Deccan Herald newspaper. A well-known public speaker and writer on issues of urban sustainability in India, she is also an associate editor of the journal Global Environment Change. Presently engaged with international science and policy through her involvement as a member of the steering committee of the Future Earth Program for Ecosystem Change and Society and the Future Earth Urban Knowledge Advisory Network. A gifted speaker that she is, she has delivered keynote addresses at various academic forums of global repute at USA, Stockholm, Milan, Beijing, and Singapore. I now extend a warm welcome to Dr. Nagendra to share her views with the august audience who's joined us on this platform, as well as who are viewing us live on YouTube. Dr. Nagendra.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sood, Professor Arvind, Dr. Bharti, Dr. Sood, everyone else, all the other dignitaries and attendants here. Thank you very much for this invitation. It's a very big pleasure to be here on World Wetlands Day and to talk about such an important issue, because wetlands are something that are essential for our survival, but somehow they tend to be areas that we just do not at all land up talking about. Just give me a second, please. I will just. Can you see this in full screen?
It's okay. It's okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the future of wetlands in India's cities, and I will beg your pardon in advance because I am based in Bangalore, and much of this research is on Bangalore, not relevant. I mean, directly it is not on Punjab, but I think it is extremely relevant to the context of Punjab. In fact, the context of all Indian areas that are fast urbanizing. So by 2050, as this map shows you, the world will be more than 75% urban. You know, we are already, if you look at the world level, more than 1 in every 2 people lives in cities. And in India, though we say that it is 33% urban as a country, by 2050, our own estimates say that we will be more than 50% urban even in India. If you think of this as a huge transition, we are moving from a country that was predominantly rural to a country which is going to be more predominantly urban. Most of this urbanization will come from small towns and smaller, not the large cities. And we know very little, first of all, about the context like India. Look at this map. It tells you that all the cities that are fastest growing, reds and yellows, are in very different contexts from the West. So the 3 fastest growing countries in the world are India, China, and Nigeria. Very different contexts from the US, from Hong Kong, from Japan, from different parts of Europe. We all must have seen some of these graphs yesterday, since the budget is so much in discussion. The Indian Economic Survey 2022 came out, and they have been sharing a number of very interesting maps and charts showing India's changes over time in the landscape. One of the maps that is most relevant here is India's night luminosity. So satellite pictures at night give you a sense of development defined in a certain way. And really what they give you is an index of urbanization. Because who leaves lights on at night? Either they're on roads or they're people in cities. And you can see in this 10-year period how much urbanization has taken. Apart from some parts of central and eastern India, where there are protected forests, some parts in the Thar Desert, maybe a little bit at the extreme coast, and some parts of the northeast. And of course, the high reaches of the Himalayas, Jammu and Kashmir. Apart from those areas, most of India is now completely overtaken by night lights and therefore overtaken by cities. What is the impact on wetlands? I want to focus my talk on urban wetlands. And this is one example of Chennai. And we know that Chennai has been hard hit by floods every single year. And it's getting worse and worse over time. There are houses that now have been, in the past 10 years, 3 or 4 times they have had to evict their houses because of, temporarily move from their houses because of flooding. These are Google Earth images, and I just showed you some of the wetlands that these wetlands have completely disappeared between 1984 and 2018. This is a hydrological network. Somebody's on, yeah, thank you. In fact, if you look at the way these wetlands are constructed across large parts of India, it's not true that there is a large river or a large coastal area associated with every city. There are many cities which are dependent on this network of small tanks or lakes, and these are hydrologically connected. When one fills up, water flows to the next and the next and the next. And the Chinese actually have a term for this. They call them sponge cities. So cities are built on wetlands. Wetlands act as sponges. And what does that mean? When you have a lot of rainfall, the wetland soaks it up like a sponge, preventing flooding. And in the summer, when you have drought, the wetland releases the water. It's like a squeezed sponge, and you can actually use that water. For India, which is so seasonally dependent on the monsoon, we have a huge dependence on wetlands, which we don't recognize. Otherwise, it makes no sense that cities like Chennai and Mumbai face floods, and Kerala also, large parts of Kerala, face now flooding every year in the monsoon season and face droughts every year in the summer. So flooding and droughts and the loss of wetlands are inextricably interconnected. It is really very puzzling then that we proceed with these kinds of development activities like Kerala building a Cochin airport on the wetland, and Navi Mumbai is building the second airport in Mumbai, which is going to destroy mangrove wetlands, which are actually a buffer between the city and climate change, coastal flooding. So wetlands are extremely endangered across Indian cities. It's not just Chennai. For instance, some analysis we did shows you the disappearance of water bodies. This shows you the change in water bodies from the city to just the periphery. So one city is the first bar, then 1 kilometer outside the city, 5 kilometers outside the city, and 10 kilometers outside the city. And you can see whether it's Chennai or Kolkata or Mumbai, all the coastal cities, inside the city, there are barely any wetlands left. The protection, if any, is offered by the wetlands in the fringe. It's not just the disappearance of wetlands, it's the pollution of wetlands. And for instance, there is a lot of work now that is showing that Hyderabad is susceptible to superbugs. And what does this mean? Because there are wetlands outside Hyderabad. Within Hyderabad, there are very few wetlands and they're severely polluted. The ones outside Hyderabad have a number of industrial factories. So there is, for instance, there are several drug manufacturing factories, antibiotic manufacturing factories, which let their residue into these water bodies. These water bodies are where dhobis come and wash their clothes. The same clothes are used by people across Hyderabad. So there are superbugs that breed in these water, in the water of this lake and the wells associated with this river and stream and wetlands. That water has superbugs because it has so many antibiotics that there are superbugs that are resistant to antibiotics. When people wear these clothes, there are some studies which, further research is being done on this, which say that therefore people who may have never had an antibiotic in their life, when they go to hospital and are sick, might land up succumbing to disease because no antibiotics work on them because these superbugs have infiltrated the system. So urban water pollution, of course, this is a severe case of certain kinds of pollution, but something much simpler. Let's say industrial water pollution, arsenic pollution, lead pollution, and that moves into the underground water table. And that contaminates the water that people drink and makes them fall sick. And as I said, with cities becoming increasingly dependent on groundwater, this is often a problem because if borewell water and well water gets contaminated in this way, you get severe diseases also. So of course, we know this is a problem. This is also a problem because as Dr. Sood was mentioning, there are protection guidelines for wetlands, and Ramsar wetland sites especially are protected, but hardly any of the wetlands in cities are protected. Urban wetlands receive almost no protection. Even in Kolkata, if you take the East Kolkata wetlands, which is one of the very few rare Ramsar sites in cities, you will see that the East Kolkata wetland boundaries are very small. So of the Ramsar site. The Ramsar site itself is reasonably well protected, and the East Kolkata wetlands at one point stretched all the way to the Sundarbans. They have now been almost decimated because there's barely any formal protection outside the boundaries of the East Kolkata wetlands. Now, what I want to ask in the next part of this talk is this inevitable? We discuss this very often. I'm sure none of the things I have said are new to anybody. They are very stark. We know them very well. Why does nothing change? I think part of the reason nothing changes is that we think it's inevitable that India has to urbanize Urbanization is associated with development, which is associated with prosperity, and the price to pay is some ecological destruction in cities. That's okay with us broadly. And we say, you can conserve wetlands, you can conserve the environment outside the cities. In the cities, there is no place for such kind of nostalgic ideas as conservation, and that needs to be done outside areas. And this is an argument you will see commonly by media, by the regular public, by policymakers, by everyone else. What I want to challenge in my talk is this, that does the growth of cities have to mean the destruction of wetlands or destruction of all kinds of ecology? Let's look at the growth of Bangalore as an example. And this is, Bangalore was, the market town of Bangalore is relatively old, but not very old as Indian cities go. It was founded in 1537 by Kempegowda. The small maroon area in the center is Kempegowda's original boundaries, and you can see the city has grown and grown and grown over time. The grey area is now the Bangalore Metropolitan Rural Development, Metropolitan Development Area, which is huge. The city itself started in the earliest evidence of Bangalore is human settlements in Bangalore date to about 4th, 5th century BC, because you have some megalithic stone tombs and they date back to that area. But it's an unusual city. We don't know what these people were doing there because there's no large water body. There is no perennial water source. The first ideas we start understanding about the city in terms of who lived there is that there are large caches of Roman coins found around the BC to AD turn in number of places across the city. So many that are found from different areas that we know that there must have been trade. This has to have been a trade route, which means it was some kind of an important city. Again, very puzzling because we don't know why and how. However, from about the 5th or 6th century CE onwards, you start seeing inscriptions either on copper plates or on stone, which tell you about the people who settled in these areas. And these people settled in this dry area from various dynasties, starting with the Ganga dynasty. If this is the black here, this is what we call a digital elevation model, which gives you a sense of the topography of the Bangalore landscape. And of course, this is pre-city. What I want to show you in this next series of graphs is that the population of this area grew because they created artificial wetlands. So the lakes that survive in Bangalore are human created and artificial. And they were the reasons that prosperity came to this urban area and that people could actually grow. So I want to challenge the idea that development means the loss of wetlands. If you look at this area, so Bangalore in the eastern area is relatively flat, and the western area, as you can see, is more rocky. So people start moving into the east in the Ganga dynasty, more in the Chola dynasty, and in the Hoysala dynasty, there is actually a spurt of growth. And you can start seeing that they build lakes. I will show you some inscriptions later. And they create these artificial bodies or water bodies or tanks, which we now call lakes. And many of them are named with a suffix called Sandra. So the very first one you can see is Honga Sandra. Then you can see Mallasandra, Sekasandra 19 and 20. Kunte and Kere in 21 and 22 are smaller water bodies. So the large one, Sandra, is a corruption of the Sanskrit word Samudra, which means a large body of water. So these are very large lakes, perennial for some, at least for most of the year. Then there were some seasonal lakes, which are Kuntes and Keres, which were used for washing cattle for domestic uses. And then, so there's a range of water bodies. This is because of the Hoysala dynasty across South India. They were very famous for tank building and for hydrological connectivity. So any lake that is upstream, they connected it to a downstream lake. So water flowed from one water body to another. Any lake or tank on the east side and west side had two large wells. It was also associated with a large grazing land, which is commons land for cows to graze, and with a gundutop or two, which are local village forests, which provided fruit like jackfruit and mango, as well as wood. Jackfruit and mango, of course, were used for all kinds of village needs. So that is an entire wetland landscape. There is a lake, there are the wells, there is a grazing area, then there is the gundutop or the groves and the village. And the lake was seasonal, so when it actually disappeared in the summer months, there were certain kinds of fish that would be water resistant to complete drought. They would flop on the floor of the lake and people would wade in and pick them up. And during the complete time when the lake had dried up, they would grow millets and some other kinds of rice. But there were also weeds, monogone sappu that we should call them, the greens that would grow on these that women would use for cooking, that cattle would use for grazing. So it's a landscape that was a very provisioning landscape that actually kept the entire region alive. And of course, this continues to the Vijayanagara dynasty. This landscape was very cognizant of its water bodies. So many of these stones are actually land grants that are written, which is basically a land grant of donation of some area to typically a temple by the creator of this lake or tank. And the way they describe this, the boundaries of this village will have the tank and the wet and the dry lands, that is the irrigated and the non-irrigated, paddy and the millets, including the wells underground and the trees overground. So you will see that water, today's definition of any survey documents, you will never see the wells underground with the trees overground ever being part of a landscape. But they had this knowledge that water is what sustains life, and therefore the wells underground and the trees overground were as much part of this land grant document as anything. You know that some of these were created because, for instance, Agara Lake in 870 AD, there is a note that talks about a Ganga dynasty Odia or chieftain, Irugamaya's son Sirimaya, who fixed sluices to 2 tanks, had a 3rd eastern tank built, and because of his work in this area, obtained the Bituvata or the rights to irrigate without tax of these 3 tanks. Of these 3 tanks, we see only one today, Agara. We have no idea which these last 2 tanks are. So the lakes have disappeared across the city. Who built them? They are not just the kings and the chieftains who built them. There are regular people. For instance, a woman's inscription says that she built a particular lake for the support of animals, cattle, birds, living beings, and the services of all times of the goddess Ganga. Another woman built a lake or a tank in order that her husband and other relatives for 21 generations might obtain merit. Another man created a tank because dharma might be to his father. We even have a tank here called Suli Kunte. Kunte is a small body of water. Suli in Kannada means prostitute. So you can see ordinary people with great sacrifice putting in money that they have collected through all kinds of means for social service. And this is very important because the idea of merit, of wetland restoration, of wetland protection was an idea of merit, of giving back to society, not just for dharma for your family, but for the service of the goddess, for the service of animals, cattle, birds, and the entire landscape around you. Even today, if you go to the villages outside Bangalore, they have a tradition of what we call a sisindri. That is, if you have a large platform with a banyan tree, they will have a small water tank, which they keep filled with water year round, so that any passers-by who come sit under the tree can get fresh, clean drinking water. And this is done again, not by anyone else, but it is done by somebody relatively prominent in the village to get merit, because the idea is that when you help people, you get merit. So wetlands were very part of the Indian culture, and they had various other kinds of ideas of sustainability. They said that this land, this wetland, or this lake and the surrounding areas will endure as long as the sun and the moon endure, as long as the rocks, the kaveri, the grass, and the earth endures. And if you violate it and take away or spoil this area, you will incur various sins of having slaughtered cows, being born worms, being born husband of your own mother, all kinds of curses. And this is Bangalore, but this is common across India. You will find similar inscriptions wherever you go. Again, this is another example of how this was created. And this is a very interesting inscription because it tells you how people moved in. This particular village, these superintendents and inhabitants of the Nadu or the locality, what did they do? They cleared the jungle. They leveled the ground. They built a village, constructed a tank, removed the sand, and then named the village Vachidevarpuram. And they granted to Vachidevar, or the local god, the wet and the dry lands and the tanks and the four boundaries. But they cleared the jungle, leveled the ground, built a village, constructed a tank by removing the sand. So you cannot build the village without building the tank, because without the water, how will people survive? What happens after 1537 when Kempegowda comes in? We don't know for a while because his dynasty survives, and we have a lot of oral myths, but nothing is recorded. But for a while, Shivaji's father Shahji then comes in at the head of the at the head of the Bijapur Sultanate, and takes over a number of other locations near Bangalore and is given Bangalore what they called Bing Rule as a Jagir of his own. And his court poet, Parmanand, writes a poem called Shiva Bharat, which was published in 1670 in Sanskrit. And the translation is, it describes Bangalore in the 1640s. And it talks about the city which is teemed with deep lakes. Each house is graced by a well. There are fountains at every square spouting mist. The city is girdled by a bottomless moat. And you see the motif of the Sandra or the Samudra comes back, dotted with countless lakes, each as big as a sea. So we know that Bangalore in the 1640s was also highly dependent on these wetlands. We then again lose information or documented written information, though we have oral histories. But in 1791, briefly, Tipu Sultan loses Bangalore for 2 years to the British after the Third Anglo-Mysore War. And then he ransoms it back. But the British are here for 18 months. So the first thing, of course, they do is draw maps. And you can see the map of the city. The boundaries that I have given are the later day cantonment and Tete or the local areas. But this is the landscape that they drew. And if you digitize this and look at the water bodies, there were a lot of water bodies that were interconnected spatially. By 1888, so the British then took over in 1799 and made Bangalore the capital of their area by about 1905 or 6. And they systematically started creating a number of new water bodies. The Miller's Tank series, Sankey Tank, Alsur Lake was expanded because the water came from these areas. So as they had newer settlements, they always built water bodies. And you see by 1888, this is how the region looked. By 1890, there was a series of droughts. So till then, what has happened, Bangalore has grown because of its attention to water. And then what happened is when you see that Bangalore starts to run out of water, there are too many people. In 1890, there is a series of droughts for 3 years. So they decided to get piped water for the first time to the city. And this piped water this is very important. It was originally planned to supplement water use in the city, but it eventually replaced all the water use in the city. So piped water came in from outside, from the Arkavati River, and people stopped using local lakes. The moment they stopped using local lakes, there were goddesses to these lakes. There were annual pujas that were done. There were annual restoration of the lake by deepening the silt. Lakes were very well protected. They had a lot of commons laws about use. By 1893 or 1894, in one stroke, that has disappeared. People during the plague even start throwing corpses into the lakes and corpses into the wells. They are considered now cesspools of malaria and sewage. The narrative completely changes, all because people no longer use them. When your local dependence on a water body goes, when water comes from far away, you no longer realize or think of these wetlands as important. So something that is set up from the 6th and 7th century runs till 1888, has a clear tradition and a way of use, completely breaks down in just a few years. And you see 1888, where you see wetlands all around. See, by 2015, only one is left, Alsur Lake in the heart of the city. And that is also, I'll just go up again. Just look at the lake in the heart of the city, which is Alsur. In 1888, it's double the size. Even that single lake is now half the size. And then what happens? Of course, when it rains, the center of the city floods because these wetlands have disappeared and there's nothing to hold the water. And of course, the center of the city is extremely water starved. Unless you get Kaveri water, and we all know the Kaveri is drying up, this city is going to run out of water. So regularly projections now say that Bangalore, like Cape Town, is going to enter ground zero very soon without water. What are we thinking of doing? We are not thinking of restoring lakes and water bodies in the city. Instead, we want to get water from the Mangalore coast, water from a very far off water body in Yatinhole, water, all kinds of river linking into projects, instead of trying to fix the current problem, which is to restore wetlands in the city itself. However, in the periphery of the cities, there is still signs of hope. For instance, one of the lakes I have been involved with is Kaikondari Lake, which is restored and maintained by a collaboration between citizens and the BBMP. This is the lake in 2007. And after restoration, this is how the lake looks. It now has over 100 species of birds, including a lot of pelicans and a number of beautiful birds. In fact, Eleanor Ostrom, who was the Nobel Prize winner in 2009 for her work on the commons, recognized the work at this lake by planting a jackfruit tree. So the lakes are getting better protected. You see a lot of restoration. But the one thing you don't see is, as you protect lakes and wetlands in the city, you shift the use. They used to be used by dhobis, by grazers, by migrant workers, by women foraging. Now they become rejuvenation sites for groundwater recharge, recreation, and nature watching. The lakes are protected, you often lose the wetlands behind. And you can see here a large grove of eucalyptus plantations far to the lake. That is the forest department's work. They planted a lot of eucalyptus and acacia plantations in many of the wetland areas. So the afforestation drive, and I think Dr. Bharti alluded to this, is taking over many of these wetlands, unfortunately. And in the name of protecting nature, we actually destroy nature. We have found, though, that these restored lakes play a very important role in the mind space of the city, because when you have an Indian city, you have a lot of migrants. And the problem is then that none of these migrants think of the city as their own, and they don't want to get involved with restoration initiatives or protection initiatives. But we have found, looking at 3 or 4 restored lakes, that just the fact that you have a place of nature which is restored where you can go every day makes you create a strong connection. So this woman below, she is from the original village. She says she is the lake Dattaputri. She was baptized at the lake. There are mothers of differently abled children. There are corporate employees. There are transgender people. There are these workers who come from Bellary. They all say that they formed connection to the lake and they now feel the city is their own because they see a bird or a tree that they recognize. Or like the women here, they would get 1,000 rupees more if they work in the construction company across the site. But for their child, it is more hazardous. So they would rather take this job that pays a little less at the lake because they want fresh air for the children, just like we want fresh air for our children. Right? So these lakes are very important in the city for keeping many people not just alive, but I think mentally rested and rejuvenated. The problem there, but then has been with the kind of lake restoration that these are hydrological chains and there are 3 different valley systems. But often what happens is, you can see the hydrological connectivity here. These lakes get restored piecemeal. And what happens is when you restore one wetland without thinking what is upstream and downstream of it, there's no point. It can get completely destroyed again. So one of the things we have been successful in is working with the municipality, this entire area within the red boundaries, to treat it as a sub-unit which is hydrologically connected and restore it in that way. And that is a paradigm shift that we are trying to see if they can now transport to the rest of the city. What we have found is this kind of restoration is not just useful for people, it is also useful for birds. So a new study of ours looking at eBird citizen data finds that because these lakes are restored, resident species of birds have increased hugely. Migratory species continue to disappear because, of course, migratory species are along the entire range of coming into the city and going out. A lot of things have happened along the way. But resident species have actually increased in abundance over time in Bangalore, despite the urbanization, despite the pollution. And that is really a positive testament to the restoration of these lakes. And you can see more graphs here. I won't go into this. I just want to end with one thing. When we're looking at this going beyond Bangalore, how do we actually make policy recommendations? So one of the things we are trying to do is use remote sensing, using technologies, using Google Earth Engine to map all the largest cities, 10 largest cities of India. We've started with this. Eventually, we are now moving this to a 100-city project where we want to look at small cities and towns as well as the large cities. But I want to show you this, that if you look at the water bodies, the last graphs on the right, and you look at Mumbai and Bengaluru, you'll see very different patterns. And these different patterns relate to the kinds of cities. Some cities like coastal cities like Mumbai, Kolkata and Chennai are linear because they are bounded by the coast and they are forced to grow along the coast. Cities like Bangalore, cities like Chandigarh, they're more round cities because they are not constrained as much by something around. But of course, there is the Aravalis, for instance. So, you have to see what kinds of spatial patterns you have. That influences the kind of water bodies that you see, whether within the city or outside the city. And that spatial pattern in turn influences what kinds of water conservation or tree conservation plans you can make. So and that is our next phase where we are trying to look at these 100 cities and come up with some kinds of policies of different types of cities, develop a typology of Indian cities and then come up with plans. And I end with this, that the story of Bangalore is not just a story of Bangalore, it has parallels to the story of many cities across India. This shows us that Indian cities have grown because of their attention to water and wetlands. And there is still that very unique living cultural heritage. We are documenting, for instance, songs around water bodies and wetlands. And women still are custodians of these songs, which tell you many things. They will tell you what the traditions were, but they will also tell you where the channels were, what the crops were grown, how to restore the wetlands. And often the wetland might have gone, the lake might have gone, but the Devi's temple still remains and the women's songs remain, or the Dalit songs in that area remain. And that gives you a sense of how to restore these areas. So I think this challenges the idea that urbanization is incompatible with water conservation, and we need to have a better understanding of our history, sometimes documented, sometimes through these oral myths, songs, whatever other approaches that we have, to learn how to manage our future. And I'll end with this. Of course, this is my book, which has more details on this, but I don't want to take up too much time, so let me stop.
Thank you, Dr. Nagendra. It has been a wonderful discourse delivered by you, talking about the relevance of wetlands and taking us to the concept of sponge cities, threats to urban wetlands, which everything, I think most of the policymakers are oblivious to. And you've really touched upon really very important, pertinent topics of urbanization, development, and dislocation. So there is an urgent need to conserve wetlands, and we really hope and we wish you the best of luck for envisioning policies that go further down the lane in promoting and protecting wetlands. Thank you very much. I would now request my worthy colleague, Professor Manish Kapoor, to kindly take over the stage and give us a brief introduction about the second speaker of the day.
Thank you, Dr. Sood. I feel very much privileged to introduce our next speaker of the day for this webinar, our audience, Dr. Gitanjali Kanwar, who is coordinator for WWF India and is working on aquatic biodiversity and its habitat in the Indus River Basin in India since 2010. So it's almost 12 years that she's working on the Indus River restoration. She has conducted focused studies on the population abundance and habitat occupancy of the Indus River dolphins in the Beas Conservation Reserve. She is member of the most prestigious crocodile specialist group of International Union for Conservation of Nature and is engaged in monitoring of the reintroduction of the Gharial population in Beas Conservation Reserve. She is also engaged in creating awareness among masses and connecting people with the rivers and wetlands and raising conservation awareness among them with a special focus on riparian communities. So I welcome Dr. Gitanjali Kanwar for her talk.
Yeah, thank you, Punjabi University, and especially Center for Restoration of Ecosystem of Punjab. And Professor Arvind is there, and Dr. Bharti is there. I really feel privileged and very happy that I am here today on World Wetland Day and sharing whatever I am working on and whatever I associated in Punjab and on wetlands. And thank you very much for inviting me. And I also congratulate you for opening this restoration service, restoration cell. I hope this goes way ahead and helps in supporting the wetlands and other important ecosystems in Punjab. I also want to clarify here, I am not doctor yet. And I'm a simple person who just love working on this wetland. It has been a decade long now that I'm working on wetlands. So we all know that wetlands are distinct ecosystems and they can be covered with water or permanently or seasonally. In Punjab, we have mostly fresh water. And here I'm showing you a picture of a man-made wetland, which is now majorly in all over India as all over world. We have now more man-made wetlands in comparison to the natural wetlands. And this one is the picture of a Kanjali wetland. This is another kind of a wetland, a natural stream, which is seasonal and is majorly used for irrigation. Then we also have natural wetland, This is a picture of Keshopur wetland, and it's a natural wetland, and only that big wetland in that area. It's basically in the floodplains of Ravi and Beas. Once we had many like this, but they have quickly disappeared. We have village ponds. This is another kind of wetlands which are quickly disappearing from villages of Punjab. We have lost already wells, and now this is the second kind of wetlands which are very quickly disappearing from our major wetlands, even if it's like they are annually disappearing from our villages. Then we have man-made tanks. This one is actually from Rivalsar, but there are many artificial bodies which are present even around the religious bodies in Punjab. And lakes, this one again is from Himachal. And then we have the another kind of man-made wetlands, which is the paddy fields and the fishing ponds. So all this are abundantly now found, not abundantly, but can be easily spotted in Punjab. It's well known to us. These are very productive systems and give us a range of ecosystem services. So this one is Beas Conservation Reserve, and this is the picture is taken in a flooded condition, and it stores the flood water, retains the nutrients and sediments. It's the production house of so many wetland products are obtained from these wetlands, supports biodiversity, supports with the agricultural production, and a delight for a lot of tourists, and a major attraction and recreation center in Punjab. Wetlands are the major recreation center in Punjab. So I'll be sharing a few highlights from the Global Wetland Outlook. This was published first in 2018 by Ramsar, and then a special edition in 2001. But the picture is very similar for world and for India and for Punjab also. We have lost 87% of our global wetlands in last 300 years. And it's very sad that 35% of the natural wetlands have been lost. And we see this one drastically happening in India as well as in Punjab. We have almost lost, like very small percentage of natural wetlands are there, especially in Gurdaspur and in Gurdaspur district of Punjab. Otherwise, we are losing them very fast. There is an increase in man-made wetlands since 2017. And these man-made wetlands are in the form of paddy fields and reservoirs or fish ponds. And as the natural wetlands and wetlands are declining, there is also a steep decline in the wetland-dependent species. Then both the species as well as the number, both are declining. And one of the major cause for this is the land use change. This is so applicable even in case of Punjab, where every day, every year, the wetlands are getting converted into farmlands. Encroachment is one of the major threats to the wetlands in Punjab. To the marine ecosystems, this report says that unsustainable fishing practices is adversely impacting the marine wetlands, and both the quality and number of wetlands are severely getting impacted. Just giving you a glimpse of the biodiversity in the wetlands of Punjab, various wetlands of Punjab. So we have the only population of Indus River dolphin in Punjab. We have 7 species of freshwater turtles. We have around 400 birds, both resident and migratory, of which around 100 are the water birds. We have these wild boars living on the edges of the wetlands. Then we have the good population of smooth-coated otters, and obviously the mammals, like mammals and small cats, which are using this area around the wetlands. And we also have the reintroduced population of gharial since 2017 in the Beas Conservation Reserve and Harike. The global report of WWF India released in 2018 indicates that in comparison to the terrestrial species or marine species or the global vertebrates, if you see, the freshwater species have shown the greatest decline, and it's shockingly 83%. We have a similar story as well as in Punjab. So the decline of species as well as the shrinking area of wetlands is very, very evident and can be seen. We have 1.7% of the total area under wetlands. We have nearly around 50 small and big wetlands in Punjab, of which 6 are Ramsar sites, and most of these wetlands are located on Beas and Satluj and Ravi River, which are the 3 major rivers of Punjab. We also have Ghaggar, which makes the border with Haryana. And our wetlands are located very near to this rivers. So we have a recently declared a Ramsar site, which is Nangal Wildlife Sanctuary. Then we have another Ramsar site declared in 2002, Ropar Conservation Reserve. Harike, one of the oldest recognized Ramsar site and one of the largest also. And then stretch of, then we have Kanjli, which is a historic as well as culturally very important wetland because it's associated with the first Sikh Guru. And then we have Beas River. The stretch of Beas River in Punjab has been also declared as a wetland of international importance. This is the area which is very unique and very different. I'll be also speaking about in my slides coming soon. So this wetland lies in the floodplains of Ravi and Beas River. And there were once many, many more bigger wetlands in this area. Whenever I interact with the riparian communities and the locals over there, so there are a lot of stories and a lot of interesting records from that area. But now we have very few, and luckily we have one of these. It is also one of the it is also protected under Wildlife Protection Act because this is also a community reserve, India's first community reserve. We have other wetlands also, but they are not recognized yet as Ramsar or as wetlands in Punjab. So taking you through the wetlands. So this one is the Nangal wetland. All the Ramsar sites almost in Punjab are also the protected wetlands. So this one has an area of 116 hectare. We do annual water bird count here. It has a population of nearly 40 water birds, and the population size is also not very big. It's around 4,000, but it supports a lot of fishes, and that too cold water fishes. Mashir, you find plenty of mashirs in Nangal wetland. The catchment area is very rich, still has migratory population of leopards and other area with other animals like sambar, which uses wetland as well as an rescue habitat. Another important wetland on Satluj is the Ropar wetland. So this is how Ropar looks like. Ropar also has a fairly good species count, water bird species count, that is around 65, and nearly 4,500 birds, migratory birds, arrive in this wetland every year. It was also declared as a Ramsar site in 2002, and actually it came into existence much ahead than Harike. It came into existence with the formation of Bairaj in 1882. So there were a lot of reports of a few interesting and very important species in the catchment of Ropar. And we placed camera traps, and it is so interesting that in such a conflicting area and living so closely with the community, we still have small but significant population of pangolins and python living in very close vicinity of the Ropar wetland. This is the star wetland of Punjab, Harike, and one of the oldest. It came into existence in 1952 with the construction of Bairaj. It is also a protected wetland and declared as a wildlife sanctuary. It was one of the top 8 Ramsar sites of India, as well as first Ramsar site of Punjab, and declared as a Ramsar site in 1990. It has 41, the sanctuary area is much bigger, 86 square kilometer, but the wetland area is 41 square kilometer. It attracts a lot of birds. The count sometimes reaches 1,05,000 or 10,000 also, but on average, if you see the average data, it's around 96,000, and we have around 95 water bird species, which arrive in this wetland or spend the winter in this wetland. We have a very good population of smooth-coated otters in this wetland. Indus River dolphin also uses the Beas section. So Harike is at the confluence of two major rivers, Beas and Satluj. And Indus River dolphin uses the Beas section of Harike. It's a normal foraging ground for Indus River dolphin. And of course, we have a lot of waders as well as ducks, which arrive every year here in large numbers. Beas Conservation Reserve, so it's 185-kilometer stretch, one of the recent site to be declared as a Ramsar site. And this is also a protected wetland. It's a conservation reserve and specially declared as a conservation reserve to provide protection to the important species like gharial and dolphins. And all these protected wetlands are managed by Department of Forest and Wildlife Preservation. So it's the different divisions who are working on the protection of the species. So Kanjali is also recently declared as a conservation reserve in 2019, and it is also one of the very old wetland which came into existence almost around 1870, and it was declared as a Ramsar site in 2002. And as you see, you mostly see it in a very degraded condition because it gets a lot of industrial effluent and is full of water hyacinth. It was once, it had a very good population of Utricularia, which you now have difficulty in finding it so when you do the surveys, you really don't find this insectivorous plant anymore. So this one is special and very important for me, because it not only supports unique species, but it is a natural wetland, which is very fast disappearing. And all the catchment, as soon as you step out of the wetland, it's either agriculture field or a metalled road. And the water from this wetland, the approach is to drain all the water from this wetland, but you'll be surprised to see the kind of biodiversity and the kind of flocks of birds which visit in this area. So every birder's desire is to visit this wetland and the way you can approach the birds, see the birds, is one of the most unique wetlands right now in Punjab. It is more important because this is the only wetland in Punjab which supports the population of cranes. So it has a resident Saris crane as well as a migratory common crane in Punjab. This is also one of the recently declared Ramsar site. It was declared, it's the first community reserve, declared as a community reserve in 2007, but declared as an Ramsar site in 2019. It also has a good population of birds, nearly around 20,000 and 75 species. And one of the prime reason for this wetland to be declared as a Ramsar site was the resident population of cranes as well as the kind of migratory bird it supports in winter. So I'll also take you through the challenges and the key issues in Punjab. All these pictures which I'm showing you have been taken in these wetlands only. So the attitude of the communities as well as of us, the common people around the wetlands, as well as the industrialists. So for us, they are the wasteland and or the just waste dumping grounds. And it is very, very evident. And this you can also see. So the kind of effluent entering into our wetlands and the kind of mortality of the species which is happening is unbelievable. So pollution is one of the major concern. We have almost in Punjab all man-made, majorly all man-made wetlands, and all these are very near to rivers. So the effluent and the pollution levels in the wetlands and the water quality is very, very degraded. The second is the key challenge is the siltation and soil erosion, which is happening due to the deforestation in the Shivaliks, and this silt coming into the wetlands and reducing the water holding capacity of the wetlands. Weed infestation, so it's year after year, season after season, the same situation. You'll extract them out, but they are back because we are not, the root cause is not removed. We have very restricted water, we have altered water entering into the wetlands, and then the water has a very degraded water quality, due to which the common thing, eutrophication happens, and there is outgrowth of the weeds, and it just leads into fish kills, and things like those are very, very common in the wetlands. As I mentioned, encroachment and illegal hunting and poaching, because animals have very small space to live, so they're very, very vulnerable to be poached and hunted. And an encroachment is a very, very important challenge which is there around our wetlands. I've already spoken about the reduced water flow. The priority is to supply water for irrigation, due to which what happens is that all of a sudden there is so much alteration in the wetlands and in the water levels in the rivers that it's difficult for species to adjust to it. For example, sometimes dolphins, I'll just give you an example. It's a very big example. Dolphin is not even a wetland species. It's a riverine species. So animal like dolphin gets trapped into small pools because of the very limited water flowing through Bias. So think about the other animals which are very much smaller and living in much less water. And so this is a picture from Bias also, where you can see you can see two small gharials which are almost connected to the mainland. So basically these gharials are they mostly prefer the mid-channel islands. They stay in the mid-channel islands, but because there was so less water, these mid-channels get connected to the side channels, and basically they get connected to the main bank of the river, which put them into immediate threat. There can be humans can they can be easily accessed. Their habitat can be easily accessed. There are feral cattle, there are feral dogs, as well as human presence, which disturbs them. And there is alteration in the habitat. There is sand mining. There is unsustainable utilization of the natural resources, grass cutting, which is happening in the wetland areas, and has become a major issue and challenge for the wetlands. So there is also positive, because I've said so much right now. So I also want to share a positive here also, which has happened actually during COVID lockdown. So during the first COVID lockdown, what happened was that industries were also shut. And the picture which you see at the bottom is of the confluence of Bias and Satluj in Harike. And the picture you see on the top is again of the confluence. The one below is taken in before the COVID lockdown, and the one on the top is after the COVID lockdown is there. Yeah. So you can clearly see how the industrial, so it's slowly the black river or the polluted river turned into a very normal river. The water quality improved, and there are also supporting figures on that, water quality figures on that. And now the interesting thing happens. The interesting thing is that the fishes moved into Satluj, and after fishes, the dolphin also moves into the Satluj river. So this is in 2020, we have a first record. So the dolphins were spotted for the first time, not for the first time, we spotted them for the first time in 2007. But I have been working since 2010, and I have never spotted a dolphin in Satluj. And this was the first time that we get a record that dolphins are actually using the Satluj river. And it is very, very important that how, if the systems are restored, how the animals will go back and will use the same area. And it was a whole system. We also recorded a huge number, a shift and increase in fishes in Satluj, along with the dolphins. And now they're back to Vyas. Now they are no more using the Satluj section again. I'll not go into this, but there are several laws which are protecting wetlands, but I want to talk especially about on the wetland conservation and management rules, which were released in 2017. So basically, the highlights from these rules is that now the powers and functions are with the state government and with the UTs and the Ministry of Environment and Forest will be guiding them through National Wetland Committee. There now every state has state wetland authority, and basically one good thing is that you identify all the wetlands. Basically, other departments think it as a wasteland, but now the attempt is to identify all the wetlands in your state and notify them. And for notifying, obviously, first you inventorize, then you prepare a brief document, which document about the ecological characteristics of a wetland and the administrative setup in that wetland. You prepare a health card, which is from the both primary and secondary research. You include it. You engage people, various people. It made government people, like people from government, people from civil society, local people, farmers, everyone. You involve them as methods, prepare an integrated management plan, prepare the immediate actions, and that's how that has started happening in our wetlands as well. So we have also made an inventory. We are also supporting Government of Punjab in making brief documents and wetland health cards and wetland methods. So I'll now what WWF India and what we are doing in Punjab. One is we are conducting focus studies on certain species. Dolphin is one of them. Dolphin is one of them. Gharial is one of them, and migratory birds is one of them. As well as we conduct short studies on other species like otters, and when required, on the fishes also. So these are the glimpses which. Actually, this is a training conducted for the forest department, and after which we conducted the surveys for dolphin in the complete 185-kilometer stretch of Beas. This is also by engaging various citizen groups as well as the birding groups from Punjab as well as from outside the Punjab. There is a separate monitoring which is conducted by the department, but we ensure that one census is conducted in these wetlands for water birds in the peak migratory season, and various experts and birders connect during this time, and they conduct the counts and assessments for these wetlands. Another thing what we do is that people living on the banks of the river. So there are different stakeholder groups. There are urban as well as the rural groups, and we have different ways to engage with them. One of the way here in this picture particularly, so this one is from Kapurthala district, and we are engaging people in wetland health assessment. So the training has been conducted. It's a very actually, it's a very elaborative process, but it's carried out in parts and in a very simplified manner for all the riparian communities. So basically, there are 5 components to it, and we will give them briefly. We'll tell them about each component and how you can monitor the wetland health of your own wetland and how you can support in the wetland conservation. And this has actually helped because there was a big molasses spillage in 2018 in Beas. And the first information, so the idea is that we conduct training and a person can pick up any component as per his capacity and as per his interest. So in 2018, when there was a molasses spillage, The first information about this molasses village came from a riparian community. And it reached so fast to us because of this network, because of these victors who are there and who are monitoring the wetland on their own, that a timely action was taken. Otherwise, I am sure that the whole damage would have been done, and we would not have got this information in time to take an action. This is another way of engaging them. So that was our training. This is we have made a network of friends of dolphins. So basically around the dolphin habitat, we have engaged with the ferrymen, with the people who have their farms around the Bias. And we conducted a series of training for them. We made a very simple pictorial data sheet for them to document what they see on dolphins. And it was we got very positive feedback from them. And the information also is collated and is shared with the department for any action to be taken. So basically they monitor how many dolphins, how many cows, if there is a threat to the dolphins. And I'll share here a interesting thing about the COVID lockdown again. So there were all of a sudden the COVID lockdown was announced, and we lost our access to the river. We could not visit river for 3 months. And this has happened for the first time, that all of a sudden it was inaccessible. But it was for these mithers who are right now in the prime dolphin habitat around 60 to 70 kilometers of rivers. There are 15, 16 mithers who are dedicatedly working for the dolphin conservation. Because of these people, because of these mithers, because of their engagement, and they live right on the banks of the river. It is because of them, each day we knew about the dolphin presence. Each day we knew that if there is a stranding case or if there is any threat. And it's totally because of this mithers who were our eyes and ears for knowing about dolphins during the COVID time. I will share here a video. One second. Is the volume audible?
Yeah, it's fine.
It's audible.
This video is on the mithers.
ਮੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਭਾਗਾ, ਮੈਂ ਕਰਮੂ ਵਾਲੇ ਦਾ ਰਹਿਣ ਵਾਲਾ, ਉਮਰ ਮੇਰੀ 20 ਸਾਲ, ਮੈਂ ਬੇੜੀ ਚਲਾਉਂਦਾ ਜੀ। ਸਾਡਾ ਮੈਡਮ ਜੀ ਖਵਾਜਾ ਪੀਰ ਹੈ, ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਦੂਜਾ ਪ੍ਰਸ਼ਾਦ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਦੂਜਾ ਪੂਜਦੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਜੀ। ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਪਿੰਡ 'ਚ ਲੋਕ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ, ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਹ ਦਰਿਆ 'ਚ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਆ, ਅਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਦੀ ਰਕਸ਼ਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਨਾ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਵੇ। ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮਿੱਤਰ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੰਨ ਲਾ ਬੁੱਲਣ ਨਿਕਲਦੀ ਰਹੀ ਆ, ਘੜਿਆਲ ਨਿਕਲਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਜਾਂ ਬੱਚੇ ਨਿਕਲਦੇ ਰਹੇ, ਇੱਕ ਪਾਣੀ ਦਾ ਲੈਵਲ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਵਾ, ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਥੋੜਾ ਮੌਸਮ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਸੀ ਅੱਜ, ਜਾਂ ਬੱਦਲ ਸੀ ਜਾਂ ਮੀਂਹ ਸੀ, ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹਾ ਕੋ। ਮੈਂ ਇਹੋ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਫੈਕਟਰੀਆਂ ਵਾਲੇ ਪਾਣੀ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹ ਨਾ ਪਾਇਆ ਜਾਵੇ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਨਾ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਇਆ ਜਾਵੇ। ਮਾਲ ਡੰਗਰ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਮਰਿਆ ਵਾ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਨਾ ਸੁੱਟਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸਾਫ਼ ਪਾਣੀ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਆ।
So I'm also happy to share that this network is even recognized by Government of Punjab. They also share this information with the Forest Department. So Bias is a big area and the dolphins use a lot of area. And because of this methods, the monitoring and is very, very easy in comparison to what it would have been done individually by the Forest Department or by WWF India or by any other organization. So we have these training programs for mithers, for the village persons, for farmers. one of our very important stakeholder is also children. You'll be amazed to see if you show them a picture of a python, just for example, the first thing they'll say to you is that it is an anaconda. And if you talk to them about dolphins, they'll talk about marine dolphins, which they have seen on TV. They don't know even that there is a dolphin next to them. They don't know that there are many other snakes other than anaconda. So we have opened these 30 water schools across Bias, and which are these are the villages, and the schools are right on the banks of the river. And these children, they undergo a fixed curriculum over months, 5-6 months, and they get trained. And we have a fixed curriculum dedicatedly prepared for them, which includes talking on water. So we teach them water basics. We teach them about your association with the water. We talk about health and associated diseases with the water. Then we also take them for the field visits, and then we also conduct rallies, and the message from children is conveyed to the elders about the water conservation. So we have these 30 schools. I'll also show you another video of one of our children who has been trained in water school. Right now he's in class 8. So basically right now he's in class 9th, sorry. So we conduct this for a particular age group. We conduct this water school program for only 6th to 8th classes. And this particular person has been recently even interviewed in a news channel. So I'll share the clip, and this is how he talks after getting trained in the water schools.
ਦਵਾਈਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਖੇਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਾਈਆਂ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੰਚਾਈ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਪਾਣੀ ਲਗਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ, ਔਰ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪਾਣੀ ਹੈ ਰਿਸ ਕੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਜ਼ਮੀਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਰਸਾਇਣਿਕ ਪਾਣੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਉਦਾਹਰਨ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਹਰੀਕਾ ਪੱਤਨ ਦਾ ਏਰੀਆ ਹੈ, ਔਰ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਦੇ ਲਾਗੇ ਬਿਆਸ ਦਰਿਆ ਹੈ, ਔਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪਾਣੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਰੁੜ ਕੇ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਔਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿਤੇ ਬਰਸਾਤ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀ, ਬਰਸਾਤ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਾਕੀ ਬਚਿਆ ਖੁਚਿਆ ਰਸਾਇਣ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਉਹ ਰੁੜ ਕੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਾ ਨਾਲਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਜ਼ਰੀਏ ਜਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਈਏ ਸਿੱਧੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਬਿਆਸ ਦਰਿਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚਲੇ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਜਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਮੱਛੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਪਹੁੰਚਦਾ, ਤੇ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਹਰੀਕੇ ਬਿਆਸ ਦਰਿਆ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੋਭਾ ਹੈ, ਸਾਡੀ ਡਾਲਫਿਨ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਖਾਣਾ ਵਾ ਉਹ ਖਤਮ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ। ਵਾਟਰ ਪੋਲਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਤੋਂ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਬਚਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਗਰ ਵਾਟਰ ਪੋਲਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਗੁਰੂਆਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸਿਖਾਇਆ, ਪਵਨ ਗੁਰੂ ਪਾਣੀ ਪਿਤਾ ਮਾਤਾ ਤਰਤ ਮਹਤ, ਦਿਸ ਰਾਜ ਦੋਇ ਦਾਈ ਦਾਇਆ ਖੇਲੇ ਸਗਲ ਜਗਤ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਵਾ ਵੀ ਪਵਨ ਗੁਰੂ ਹੈ, ਪਾਣੀ ਪਿਤਾ ਹੈ, ਔਰ ਮਾਤਾ ਸਾਡੀ ਧਰਤੀ ਮਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ।
So we also conduct some experiments, and we try to build even scientific acumen in them. And the idea is if they can carry this in long term, it's a real win for us. If there is a societal change, if they think about the wetlands and they think about the wetland conservation, it's a real win for us. So this is my last slide. I am going to end by saying and by answering to the audience that how can you protect the wetland? And even if you are sitting at home, or even if you are a scientist who is working on the wetlands, even if you are a researcher, or even if you are a farmer, or even if you are just a common person who just wants to understand about wetlands. So the first step is to learn, understand, and value wetlands. It's very important to value wetlands. It is unbelievable in today's time also. And as I'm speaking also, there will be some wetland in some village pond which will be actually getting filled with sand, mud, and getting converted into an agricultural field. We don't value wetlands. We don't try to understand the kind of role they play, because they have been giving us so many ecosystem services which we just take for granted. But this is not going to happen. We really need to understand and value wetlands, not consider them just as wetlands, but these are wonder lands. Visit a nearest wetland. It's very important to visit a wetland, even if it is a pond near you. As I have just said, it's actually very shocking that when you visit and interact with the communities or interact with the children, for example, I've just said, for when you show them a picture of a python, they say that it is an anaconda. When you talk about dolphins, they say that, they describe a marine dolphin, which they have seen on TV. So if you will not visit a wetland, if you will not experience a wetland, then you're learning. You cannot get learned on wetlands till you visit a wetland. Whatever you're learning, go and see and experience in a nearest wetland. Take help from the people who are working on wetlands. Act for wetlands. By acting for wetlands, so there is no action is small or a very big. Acting for wetlands can be as simple as reading about them and educating other people. Acting can be just, if you like the wetlands, just taking photographs. Acting can be stopping other people from harming the wetlands. Acting can be carrying out drives, cleaning drives. Act for wetlands can be research. There is so much which need to be done for this wetlands. And you can do research, and that will be a contribution. You're acting for the wetland conservation. And whatever you learn, don't forget it. Be a wetland mitter, be the friend of this wetland forever, ever, wherever you are. Even if you're in Punjab, even you are going outside the Punjab, take care of this wetland, because globally, as well as in India, as well as in Punjab, it's the same situation. We are losing our wetlands every year and the freshwater biodiversity which is living inside it. With this, I will end my talk. Thank you. Once again, thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
The nice presentation, and I loved the work which you have done for reintroduction of these gharials and raising the key issues. And I think above all these issues, human greed is one of the biggest issue because if we don't have that greed for land, our village ponds will not disappear at least. So thank you very much for. I pass on to Dr. Bharti.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Manish. And now may I request Dr. Gautam C to go ahead with the program?
Thank you very much, Dr. Bharti. And thank you, Ms. Kanwar, for your informative and comprehensive pictorial journey of the wetlands of Punjab and their rich biodiversity. And it's heartening to know about your efforts in monitoring biodiversity habitat, stakeholder engagement, especially youth and children, the vision for wetland conservation, and water schools. We wish you good luck with your endeavors for all your future endeavors. I would now request our worthy Vice Chancellor, Professor Arvind Ji, to kindly deliver his presidential remarks.
Yeah, so I think it has been a very good session today. We had Gitanjali and Harini, both of them came from very different perspectives. And I think we did what we wanted to do on the World Wetlands Day. I want to say something slightly different today because it's a Wetlands Day, and my own understanding, I want to get into the history of Punjab landscape in a very brief. I want to mention. You see, in one line, I would say that I think Punjab was a connected set of wetlands. And since the rivers came into the downstream in the plain areas, there was a large number of wetlands, and they were all kind of connected. The first set of damages, I think, started coming from the early canal systems because when you divert water, but the canal systems before British were very limited and they did not damage these wetlands much. But once we built dams and we dammed the rivers, we diverted water. So downstream, the wetlands began to shrink and so on. that also did not do that much damage. The most amount of damage came in 1950s when we started this whole process of drainage of water in large tracts of Punjab in order to recover a lot of agricultural land. And these drains were dug, which took the water which was there. Basically, wetlands were drained out into the rivers and which got further drained out into the ocean. So I think one should document this ecological history of Punjab. I mean, I'm not an expert in this area, but I think this history needs to be documented because that's why you see the lot of flora and fauna in the area is related to wetlands. And however, now the wetlands are very limited. So that's one point I wanted to make. The second point, of course, I want to make is that at Punjabi University, we have taken this initiative in which we are setting up this center, Punjab da Vantrend Jeev Jant Mud Bahali Kendra. And this center will work for restoration. Well, will not really work for restoration. It will do research to spin out motifs through which restoration of ecology of Punjab can be done. And therefore, wetlands and their study and their history and how we want to kind of now bring back certain things into these wetlands or bring back certain wetlands into the ecosystem of Punjab, we will begin doing research on this and many other areas related to restoration of ecosystem in Punjab. In some sense, this will also be useful for other post-Green Revolution states because again, if you look at the ecological destruction, I think the most amount of destruction has happened in the past 50 years, ever since we moved into the full-fledged Green Revolution kind of agriculture. So that also needs to be studied, reversed, countered, and concepts and motifs need to be created, which would help us restore things. In any case, I'm really thankful, and this was the first formal program after the center was launched. And I think both the speakers went into certain details and I really enjoyed the talks and I hope we will continue with such programs and then we'll strengthen this center and very soon we should be able to roll out ideas, motifs, researches which would help in the restoration process of ecosystem of Punjab. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your words of wisdom and on touching upon the real topic of importance and what needs to be done. Thank you, sir. Now I would request Professor Manuruchi Kaur, Dean Life Sciences, to deliver the vote of thanks. Manuruchi, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Gautam. So, wetlands are supposed to be the kidneys of the landscapes. World Wetland Day is celebrated always on the date that is 2nd of February. It is actually celebrated on this day just to commemorate the anniversary of the signing of the Convention of Wetlands of international importance way back in 1971. The theme for 2022 celebration of wetlands, this Wetlands Day, being Wetlands Action for People and Nature. That is to draw attention to the sustainable use of the wetlands and to promote the conservation efforts. A very good afternoon to all present. Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Arvind, our most valued speakers, invited guests, and most importantly, our audience. I am privileged to get an opportunity to propose a vote of thanks on the occasion of the celebration of the World Wetlands Day. Dr. Arvind, Vice Chancellor, Punjab University, Patiala, we would like to express our deep gratitude for your generous support in the organizing of this celebration of the World Wetland Day in the form of a webinar. We as faculty are rather thankful to you for infusing all kind of enthusiasm into us for taking up such activities. The organizers appreciate and extend their heartfelt thanks to Dr. Harini Nagendra, Director, Research Center and Professor of Sustainability at Azim Premji University, Bengaluru, Karnataka, who has graciously, accepted our invite to deliver an expert talk on the Day of Wetlands. And I thank you, Madam, from the core of our hearts for sharing your experiences with us. A student of forestry, wildlife management from Forest Research Institute, Ms. Gitanjali Kanwar. She is a specialist in aquatic biodiversity, wetlands, and rivers. She, being the coordinator of the non-profit, rather charitable organization company that is WWF India, has made tremendous contributions to the conservation of wildlife and wetlands. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your vast experience with us, and would love to see the dolphins soon. Thank you so much, ma'am. And we would like to extend our very hearty thanks to the newly formed team for the Center for Restoration of Ecosystems in Punjab under the directorship of Dr. Harminder Bharti, convener Dr. Manish Kapoorji, and the members of the center, and Dr. Devendra Pal Singh ji and Dr. Gautam Sood, especially a great, well-mannered, said thanks to you for the smooth conduct of the proceedings of the webinar today. Thank you, sir. And thanks are due to the director and staff of Computer Center, Punjab University, Patiala, for the ever available support that we get for the smooth conduct of these webinars. Their support is indispensable. We convey our thanks to express our gratitude to the press and media for providing us this occasion and excellent media coverage. We appreciate the valuable presence of the deans of various faculties, heads of the departments of the various faculties of Punjab University, Patiala, for gracing this occasion. The students and the resource scholars, the real torchbearers for the coming times, the ones who would carry our message forward. They are the minds. I hope they were kindled to a point. We thank you for your presence today. I hope that you will carry the ideas and the advice forward and would deliberate on the issues which were raised today. We understand the busy schedules of all the authorities that were making and gracing this occasion. Your presence was rather very encouraging, and by contributing your valuable time, you have made a great effort, and the whole team of Punjab University Patiala is really indebted to both the speakers and the Center for Restoration of Ecosystems of Punjab, and all the members, and me as Dean Faculty of Life Sciences are rather really thankful, and we are rather indebted to all the dignitaries. Thank you so much.
Many thanks, Professor Manruchi, for the words of encouragement. Thanks a lot. And as we reach the conclusion of the
Dr.
webinar,
Gautam Sood, may I interrupt you? We need to acknowledge the support by Punjab Science and Punjab Science State Council and Technology.
So a word of thanks.
With my thanks, I acknowledge and thank them also. Thank you so much. Sorry for that, missing that.
Okay, it's okay, ma'am.
So a heartfelt thanks to the Department of Science and Technology, Punjab State Council of Science and Technology, Chandigarh, for extending their support. And congratulations to Professor Heminder Bharti and the team, more so to the Vice Chancellor and the university family all for conducting this webinar. It has been a very informative journey, and we hope to carry forward this legacy in our life, in our lives as well, and we hope to have more of such programs. So thank you, Professor Bharti, and thank you all who are present here for being around and attending the program. So before we conclude the program, I would request you all to rise up for the national anthem.
Ganga
Thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks a lot.